Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The bass thumped through the floorboards, vibrating up my legs as I swayed unsteadily, clutching my fourth, or was it fifth beer of the night. Our living room was packed, bodies pressed together as old college friends mingled with newer work acquaintances. I grinned, taking in the scene. This was exactly the blowout party I'd hoped for to celebrate my recent promotion. Michael. My wife Lydia's voice cut through the noise. She appeared at my elbow, her cheeks flushed and a half-empty wine glass in hand. Have you seen Carla? I shook my head, the motion making the room spin slightly. Not for a while. Why? Lydia rolled her eyes dramatically. She promised to do jello shots with me. Come on, help me find her. I chuckled, allowing her to drag me through the crowd. We weaved between guests, exchanging quick greetings and accepting congratulations. I caught sight of my buddy Travis by the makeshift bar and raised my beer in salute. There she is, Lydia exclaimed, pulling me towards the kitchen where her friend Carla was chatting animatedly with a group of coworkers. Carla, Lydia called out. You promised me jello shots. Carla turned, her eyes widening. Oh shit, I totally forgot. Let's do this. I watched in amusement as the two women lined up a row of brightly colored jello cups. You sure that's a good idea? I asked, my words slightly slurred. We're both pretty far gone already. Lydia shot me a look. Live a little, babe. It's your party. I shrugged, knowing there was no point arguing when Lydia got like this. I sipped my beer, wincing slightly as I watched them down shot after shot. The party continued in full swing. I found myself in animated conversations, reliving old stories and making grand plans for the future. The alcohol flowed freely, and the world took on that pleasant, hazy quality that comes with being thoroughly drunk. It was nearing midnight when I noticed Lydia fumbling with her phone. Everything okay? I asked, wrapping an arm around her waist to steady us both. She looked up, her eyes slightly unfocused. Work emergency. I need to go in. I blinked, trying to process her words through the alcoholic fog. What? Now? You can't be serious. I have to, Michael. It's important. She started gathering her things, nearly knocking over a lamp in the process. Alarm bells started ringing in my head. Lydia, you can't drive. You're drunk. She waved a dismissive hand. I'm fine. It's not far. No way, I said, grabbing her arm. You're in no condition to drive. I'll call you a cab. Lydia yanked her arm away, her eyes flashing with anger. I said I'm fine. Stop treating me like a child. I'm not. I began, but she cut me off. I can handle myself, Michael. I don't need you babysitting me. Her words were sharp, cutting through the party noise. I felt my own anger rising. This isn't about babysitting. It's about not being a fucking idiot and driving drunk. Heads were turning now, conversations dying down as our argument escalated. You're one to talk, Lydia spat. How many beers have you had tonight? Don't be such a hypocrite. That's different, I insisted. I'm not the one trying to drive. Just leave me alone, Lydia shouted, pushing past me towards the door. I can make my own decisions. I stumbled after her, my coordination shot. Lydia, wait. But she was already out the door, fumbling with her car keys. I watched helplessly as she got in, started the engine, and peeled away from the curb with a screech of tires. Fuck, I yelled, kicking at a potted plant on the porch. It toppled over, spilling dirt across the wooden boards. Travis appeared beside me, concern etched on his face. What the hell was that about? Frustration and worry churning in my gut. She's going to get herself killed. Should we go after her? Travis asked. I shook my head. She'll just get more pissed off. God, I hope she makes it to work okay. We headed back inside, but the party mood was ruined for me. I found myself checking my phone obsessively, waiting for a call or text from Lydia. The minutes ticked by agonizingly slow. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only about 15 minutes, my phone buzzed. Lydia's name flashed on the screen. Relief flooded through me as I answered. Lydia, are you okay? But the voice that came through was barely recognizable as my wife's. It was high-pitched, frantic, broken by sobs. Michael. Oh God. Michael, help me. Ice flooded my veins. Lydia, what happened? Where are you? I. I hit someone, she choked out. There's so much blood. I think. I think they're dead. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself, my knuckles turning white. Where are you? I demanded. Have you called 911? No. Lydia wailed. I can't. Michael, I can't go to jail. Please, you have to help me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation through the alcohol-induced haze. Okay, okay. Just stay there. I'm coming. Don't touch anything, don't talk to anyone. I'll be there as fast as I can. I hung up, my hands shaking. Travis was at my side in an instant. What's wrong? I looked at him, panic rising in my chest. Lydia's been in an accident. It's bad. I need to get to her now. Travis nodded. I'll drive. You're in no shape. As we rushed out to Travis's car, leaving the party in confused disarray behind us, one thought kept repeating in my head. How the hell were we going to get out of this mess? The world outside the car window was a blur as Travis sped through the nearly empty streets. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat seeming to echo Lydia's panicked words. I clutched my phone, praying for another call, any update on the situation. Did she say exactly where she was? Travis asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I shook my head, struggling to recall the details through the lingering haze of alcohol. Just that she was on Maple Street, near the old factory. God, Travis, what if? Don't. He cut me off sharply. Don't go there. We'll figure this out. As we turned onto Maple Street, the flashing lights of an ambulance came into view. My stomach dropped. There, I pointed, my voice barely above a whisper. Travis pulled over, and I was out of the car before it had fully stopped. The scene before me was like something out of a nightmare. Lydia's car was crumpled against a lamppost, the front end a mangled mess of metal and shattered glass. And there, just beyond the reach of the streetlight, was a dark shape on the ground. Oh, fuck, I breathed, my legs threatening to give out beneath me. Michael, Lydia's voice, shrill and desperate, cut through the night. She stumbled towards me, mascara streaking down her face, her clothes splattered with what I prayed wasn't blood. I caught her as she fell into my arms, her whole body shaking with sobs. I didn't see him, she wailed. He came out of nowhere. I tried to stop, I swear I tried. Over her shoulder, I watched as paramedics worked over the still form on the ground. Their movements were urgent, but not frantic. I knew what that meant. Sir? A police officer approached. I need to ask you both some questions. Lydia stiffened in my arms, her fingers digging into my shirt. I could practically feel the panic radiating off her. In that moment, looking into her tear-filled eyes, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. Officer, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I was driving. Lydia's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. I gave her a subtle squeeze, silently willing her to play along. The officer's eyebrows rose slightly. You were driving? Not your wife. I nodded, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Yes. We had an argument at the party. I stormed off, took the car. Lydia followed in a cab to try and stop me, but I gestured helplessly towards the accident scene. I see, the officer said slowly. And how much have you had to drink tonight, sir? Too much, I admitted, the truth of that statement hitting me hard. Way too much. I'm going to need you to take a breathalyzer test, he said, producing the device from his belt. I nodded, my heart pounding as I released Lydia and stepped forward. As I blew into the tube, I caught Travis's eye over the officer's shoulder. His face was a mask of disbelief and concern. The breathalyzer beeped, and the officer's expression hardened as he read the results. Sir, you're well over the legal limit. I'm placing you under arrest for driving under the influence and... He paused, glancing towards the paramedics who were now shaking their heads. Vehicular manslaughter. The words hit me like a physical blow. Manslaughter. Someone was dead because of us. Because of me, as far as the world would know. As the officer began to read me my rights, Cuffing my hands behind my back, I looked at Lydia. She was staring at me, her face a mix of gratitude, guilt, and fear. I tried to convey everything I was feeling in that one look: my love for her, my terror at what was happening, my desperate hope that this sacrifice would be worth it. "Michael, no!" she cried out as the officer began to lead me away. "You can't. It wasn't." "It's okay, Lydia," I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "It's going to be okay. Call Robert. He'll know what to do." As I was placed in the back of the police car, I caught one last glimpse of Lydia, her hands pressed to her still flat stomach where our child was growing. In that moment, I knew I'd made the right choice. No matter what happened to me, I had to protect them both. The drive to the police station passed in a blur. I was fingerprinted, photographed, questioned repeatedly. I stuck to my story, shouldering the full blame for the accident. By the time I was placed in a holding cell, the first rays of dawn were starting to peek through the small, barred window. As I sat on the hard bench, my head in my hands, the full weight of what I'd done began to sink in. I had just thrown away my future, my freedom, to protect Lydia. And as much as I tried to convince myself it was the right thing to do, a small voice in the back of my mind wondered, would she have done the same for me? The days leading up to my trial passed in a haze of meetings with lawyers, tearful visits from family, and sleepless nights in my cell. Robert, my old college friend turned hotshot attorney, worked tirelessly on my case, but we both knew the odds were stacked against me. "Michael," Robert said during one of our meetings, his voice low and serious, "I need you to understand the gravity of what you're doing here. If you plead guilty, you're looking at serious time. We could fight this, try to get the charges reduced." I shook my head, cutting him off. "No, I've made my decision. I'll take the plea deal." Robert sighed. "You're a good man, Michael. I just hope Lydia appreciates what you're sacrificing for her." The day of my sentencing arrived all too quickly. I stood before the judge, my heart pounding as I listened to the prosecutor detail my crimes. Lydia sat in the gallery, her eyes red-rimmed, one hand resting protectively on her now visible baby bump. "Michael Blake," the judge's voice rang out, "you have pled guilty to the charges of driving under the influence resulting in death. This court sentences you to 16 years in prison and orders you to pay a fine of $50,000. Do you understand this sentence?" I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. "Yes, Your Honor." As the bailiff led me away, I caught one last glimpse of Lydia. Our eyes met, and I tried to convey all my love, all my hope for our future in that one look. Then the doors closed behind me, and my new life began. Prison was, well, prison. The days blurred together in a monotonous routine of meals, work assignments, and trying to avoid trouble. I threw myself into every program available, determined to make the best of my time and hopefully earn some good behavior credits. The letters from Lydia were my lifeline in those early months. She wrote about her pregnancy, the plans she was making for the nursery, how much she missed me. When our son Jason was born, she sent photos that I treasured, imagining holding him in my arms. But as the months wore on, the letters became less frequent, more distant. Lydia wrote about how hard it was managing on her own, the struggles of being a single mother. I tried to be supportive, to offer what comfort I could from behind bars, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between us. Then, 7 months into my sentence, everything fell apart. I was called to the warden's office, confusion and dread mixing in my gut. Had something happened to Lydia? To Jason? The warden, a stern-faced woman named Harris, gestured for me to sit. "Blake, you've got mail," she said, sliding an official-looking envelope across the desk. With shaking hands, I opened it. The words, "petition for divorce," jumped out at me, followed by a litany of demands: half of our assets, alimony, full custody of Jason. My vision blurred, the paper trembling in my grasp. "No," I whispered. "This can't be right." "I'm sorry, Blake," Warden Harris said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Your wife's lawyer contacted us. She's requesting a visitation to discuss the terms." I nodded numbly, unable to form words. How could Lydia do this? After everything I'd sacrificed for her, for our family? The day of Lydia's visit arrived, and I found myself sitting in the visitation room, my stomach in knots. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the soft, loving woman I'd married. In her place was someone cold, distant, almost sneering. "Hello, Michael," she said, sitting across from me. "Lydia," I managed. "What's going on? Why are you doing this?" She sighed, as if I were a child asking a stupid question. "It's simple, Michael. I'm moving on with my life. I can't be tied to a convict, not with Jason to think about. But I'm in here for you," I hissed, leaning forward. "I took the fall for your mistake." Lydia's eyes flashed dangerously. "Careful, Michael. Remember, as far as the world knows, you're the drunk driver who killed an innocent man. Do you really want to change that story now?" I fell back in my chair, stunned by her callousness. "Who are you?" I whispered. "What happened to the woman I married?" She shrugged, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "Maybe she never existed. Maybe this is who I've always been, and you were too blinded by love to see it." As Lydia laid out her demands, the house, the car, my savings, I felt something inside me harden. The love I'd held onto so desperately these past months crystallized into something else entirely. Betrayal, anger, a thirst for justice I'd never felt before. "You'll regret this, Lydia," I said quietly as she stood to leave. "I promise you that." She paused at the door, looking back with a smirk. "Good luck with that, Michael. In case you've forgotten, you're the one locked up in here." As the door closed behind her, I clenched my fists, my mind already racing. Lydia thought she'd won, that she'd walk away with everything while I rotted in prison. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. I might be locked up, but I wasn't powerless. Not by a long shot. As I walked back to my cell, a plan was already forming in my mind. Lydia thought she could just throw me away and start a new life. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Next week, Travis came to visit. "I've got some news about Lydia." "How bad is it?" I asked, searching his eyes. He sighed. "It's not good, Mike. Lydia's been busy." "Tell me everything," I demanded. Travis leaned forward, lowering his voice. "She's seeing someone. Has been for a while, from what I can tell. Some hotshot named Mark." My fists clenched involuntarily. "How long?" "Hard to say for sure, but—" Travis hesitated, then pushed on. "There are rumors it started before, well, before the accident." I sat back, my mind reeling. Had Lydia been cheating on me even then? Had I thrown away my life for a woman who was already betraying me? "There's more," Travis continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mark's not exactly a stand-up guy. He's got connections, if you know what I mean. Dangerous ones." I nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. "That explains the sudden divorce, the demands. She's trying to clean house, start fresh with her new man." "What are you going to do?" Travis asked, concern etched on his face. I met his gaze, my resolve hardening. "I'm going to fight back, and I'm going to need your help. Find out more about this guy, Mark, and get in touch with my college buddy, Robert." As Travis left, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The love I'd held onto for Lydia was gone, burned away by her betrayal. In its place was something colder, harder. Determination to see justice done, no matter the cost. I reached out to Robert through Travis, laying out everything I'd learned. His response was immediate and unequivocal. He'd help me fight this, tooth and nail. As I lay in my bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, I made a vow to myself. Lydia might think she'd won, but this was far from over. I'd get out of here, I'd reclaim my life, and I'd make damn sure she paid for what she'd done. The game was just beginning, and I intended to win. The visiting room buzzed with low conversations, but I barely noticed. My eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for Travis to appear. When he finally walked in, his face was a mix of determination and worry. "Mike," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "How you holding up?" I shrugged, leaning forward. "As well as can be expected. What have you got for me?" Travis glanced around before lowering his voice. "It's worse than we thought. I've been digging, following Lydia and this Mark character. And—" I prompted, my heart racing. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," Travis spat. parading around town like some happy little family. But that's not the worst of it. I braced myself. Go on. Mark's bad news, Mike. I mean really bad. Word on the street is he's involved in some serious shit. Drugs, maybe worse. My mind reeled, trying to process this information. And Lydia's with this guy? What about Jason? Travis's face darkened. That's the thing, Mike. I've seen them together. Mark's playing daddy, and Lydia's letting him. White-hot anger surged through me. The thought of my son. No, the boy I'd thought was my son, being raised by some criminal scumbag was too much to bear. We need to do something, I growled. Now. Travis nodded. I figured you'd say that. That's why I've already reached out to Robert. He's willing to help, Mike. Says he might have a way to reopen your case. Hope, fragile but persistent, bloomed in my chest. What does he need from me? Everything you've got, Travis said. Every detail about that night. Anything Lydia might have said or done since. And, he hesitated, the phone call. Tell me you still have that recording. I nodded slowly. The night of the accident, Lydia's panicked call. I'd held onto that recording like a lifeline, never imagining I'd need to use it against her. I've got it, I confirmed. Hidden away, but safe. Good, Travis said, relief evident in his voice. Robert thinks that might be our smoking gun. If we can prove Lydia was driving that night, it changes everything, I finished. We spent the next hour going over every detail, planning our next moves. As Travis stood to leave, I caught his arm. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. For sticking by me, for doing all this. Travis's eyes softened. You're my best friend, Mike. I'm not about to let you rot in here for something you didn't do. After he left, I paced my cell, my mind racing. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. But with it came a steely resolve. Lydia had betrayed me, endangered our son, and left me to take the fall. Now it was time for her to face the consequences. I grabbed a pen and paper, scribbling a note to Robert. We had work to do, and not a moment to lose. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Robert visited frequently, his briefcase bulging with documents and strategies. We pored over every detail of the case, leaving no stone unturned. The phone call recording is crucial, Robert explained during one of our meetings. But we need more. Eyewitnesses, security footage, anything that can corroborate your story. I nodded, frustration gnawing at me. But how? I'm stuck in here, and Lydia's got all the power out there. Robert's eyes gleamed with determination. Leave that to me and Travis. We're not without resources, Michael. And people are starting to ask questions about Lydia's sudden lifestyle change. As the days passed, our case slowly took shape. Travis managed to track down a convenience store with a security camera that might have caught Lydia's car that night. Robert filed motion after motion, chipping away at the prosecution's case. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Robert burst into the visiting room, his usually composed face alight with excitement. "We've got it," he announced, spreading documents across the table. "The courts agreed to hear our new evidence. Michael, we're reopening your case." I stared at the papers, hardly daring to believe it. What does this mean?" Robert's grin was fierce. "It means we fight. And believe me, we're going to hit them with everything we've got." As he outlined our strategy, I felt a surge of something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Real, tangible hope. Lydia thought she'd buried me, but she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The game was changing, and I was ready to play. The courtroom was packed. A sea of faces turned towards the witness stand where Lydia sat, her composure cracking under Robert's relentless questioning. "Mrs. Blake," Robert said, his voice cutting through the tense silence, "can you explain why your voice is heard on this recording, clearly admitting to driving the car on the night in question?" Lydia's eyes darted around the room, finally landing on me. I met her gaze steadily, letting her see the determination in my eyes. I was confused," she stammered. "It was a traumatic night. I didn't know what I was saying." Robert's eyebrow arched. "Confused enough to let your husband take the blame for a crime he didn't commit? Confused enough to let him go to prison for years?" "Objection," Lydia's lawyer called out, But it was too late. The damage was done. As Robert continued his cross-examination, I watched Lydia crumble. The facade of the grieving, abandoned wife fell away, revealing the truth underneath. When the security footage played, showing Lydia's car speeding through the intersection moments before the accident, I heard gasps ripple through the courtroom. The judge's voice cut through the murmurs. In light of this new evidence, I have no choice but to overturn the previous conviction. Mr. Blake, you are hereby released from custody. The words washed over me, almost unreal. I was free. After all this time, I was finally free. As the bailiff removed my handcuffs, I locked eyes with Lydia one last time. She was being led away, her face a mask of shock and fear. I felt no satisfaction, no joy in her downfall, just a sense of justice served. Outside the courthouse, blinking in the bright sunlight, I faced a wall of reporters. Mr. Blake, one called out, how does it feel to be exonerated? I paused, considering my words carefully. It feels right. The truth has a way of coming out, no matter how hard some people try to bury it. Robert ushered me through the crowd, his hand steady on my shoulder. Let's get you home, Michael. You've got a lot of catching up to do. Home. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. What was home now? Everything had changed. As we drove, Robert filled me in on the details. Lydia was facing serious charges, not just for the accident, but for perjury and obstruction of justice. Her carefully constructed new life was crumbling around her. What about Jason? I asked, my voice hoarse. Robert's expression softened. He's with child services for now. Once things settle, we can discuss custody arrangements. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. The boy I'd thought was my son. I didn't know how to feel about him now. The next few weeks were a blur of readjustment. I moved in with Travis temporarily, trying to piece my life back together. Every day brought new challenges, from figuring out how to use a smartphone to dealing with the stares and whispers when I went out in public. But the hardest part was yet to come. I stood outside the prison gates, my heart pounding. Lydia had requested a meeting, and against my better judgment, I'd agreed. She looked small in her prison uniform, her once perfect makeup gone, her eyes red-rimmed. Michael, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say. I sat across from her, keeping my face neutral. Then don't say anything, Lydia. Just listen. Her eyes widened, but she nodded. What you did, I began, my voice steady. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal. Of me, of our vows, of everything we built together. Lydia flinched, but I pressed on. I loved you, Lydia. I would have done anything for you. And you threw it all away for what? A thrill? A chance at a new life? Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. I'm not here for an apology, I said, standing up. I'm here to tell you that it's over. Completely. Whatever we had, whatever I thought we had, it's done. As I turned to leave, Lydia's voice stopped me. What about Jason? I paused, my hand on the door. Jason deserves better than what either of us can give him right now. I'll make sure he's taken care of, but beyond that, I need time. Walking out of that prison, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The anger, the betrayal, it was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I was ready to move forward, to rebuild my life on my own terms. But life, as I was quickly learning, had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. The lawyer's office was cool and impersonal, a stark contrast to the emotions churning inside me. Robert sat beside me, his presence a steady anchor as we faced Lydia's attorney across the polished desk. Mr. Blake, the lawyer began, his voice clipped and professional. My client is willing to agree to the division of assets as outlined in your proposal, with one condition. I leaned forward, wary. And that is? Full custody of Jason goes to you. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Robert's hand on my arm stopped me from responding immediately. May we have a moment? He asked, already steering me towards a corner of the room. Once out of earshot, Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. Michael, think carefully about this. Taking on full custody is a huge responsibility, especially given the circumstances. I knew what he meant. The DNA test results that had shattered what was left of my world. Jason, The boy I'd loved as my son wasn't mine biologically. I know, I said, but he's innocent in all this. And the alternative? We both knew Lydia was in no position to care for a child, and the thought of Jason in the system turned my stomach. Returning to the desk, I met the lawyer's gaze. I accept. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of signatures and legal jargon. As we left, a weight settled on my shoulders. I was a free man, my assets intact, and now the sole guardian of a child who wasn't mine by blood but who I couldn't abandon. Outside, the midday sun was blinding. I squinted, about to ask Robert about our next steps, when my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Hello? I answered, cautious. You think you've won? A male voice, low and menacing, growled. This isn't over, Blake. Not by a long shot. My blood ran cold. Who is this? A harsh laugh came through the speaker. Let's just say I'm a friend of Lydia's. A very close friend. And I don't take kindly to people messing with what's mine. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the phone in shock. Michael? Robert's concerned voice broke through my daze. What's wrong? I relayed the conversation, watching Robert's face darken. Mark, he muttered. It has to be. Lydia's boyfriend, the one Travis warned us about. Fear, sharp and visceral, clawed at my gut. What do we do? Robert's jaw set in determination. We protect you and Jason. I've got some contacts in private security. In the meantime, stay alert. Don't go anywhere alone. The next few days passed in a haze of paranoia. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every passing car a potential danger. I threw myself into preparing for Jason's arrival, trying to focus on creating a safe home for him. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. I was driving home from a meeting with Child Services, my mind racing with all the preparations still to be made, when it happened. A truck, coming out of nowhere, slammed into the side of my car. The world spun, metal screeched, and pain exploded through my body. When everything finally stopped moving, I found myself hanging upside down, seatbelt digging into my chest. Hands shaking, I managed to free myself, crawling out of the wreckage. The truck was gone, leaving only skid marks on the asphalt. This was no accident. As sirens wailed in the distance, I pulled out my phone with bloody fingers, dialing Robert's number. They tried to kill me, I gasped as soon as he answered. Robert, they actually tried to kill me. His response was immediate. Where are you? I'm on my way. And Michael? Don't talk to anyone until I get there. Sitting on the curb, watching the flashing lights approach, I felt a strange calm settle over me. They'd made their move, shown their hand. Now it was my turn. As the paramedics fussed over me, checking for serious injuries, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to take the fight to them. Mark, Lydia, whoever else was involved, they were going to regret ever crossing me. The game had changed, and I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. Robert arrived just as the police were finishing taking my statement. His face was grim as he surveyed the wreckage of my car. This ends now, he said, his voice low and determined. I've got a friend, a private investigator named Elliot. He's the best in the business. If anyone can get to the bottom of this, it's him. I nodded, determination settling over me. Let's do it. I want to know everything about this Mark character and anyone else involved. Robert made a quick call, his voice low and urgent. Within an hour, we were sitting in a nondescript office, facing a man who looked more like an accountant than a hardened investigator. Michael, meet Elliot. Robert introduced us. He's the best in the business. Elliot's piercing gaze sized me up. So, you're the one stirring up all this trouble. Tell me everything. I recounted the whole sordid tale, from the night of the accident to the recent attempt on my life. Elliot listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. This Mark, Elliot said when I finished. You said he's connected. Any idea how deep those connections go? I shook my head. Not really. Just that he's dangerous and apparently has resources. Elliot's lips curved into a small, humorless smile. Everyone's got secrets. Give me a week, and I'll have his laid bare. True to his word, Elliot delivered. 7 days later, we reconvened in the same office. The folder he placed on the desk between us looked innocuous, but I knew it held the key to unraveling Mark's world. "Your boy Mark," Elliot began, "is neck deep in some seriously illegal shit. Drug importation, mostly. He's got a whole operation set up, disguised as a legitimate import-export business." Robert leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Can you prove it?" Elliot nodded. "Got financials that don't add up, some grainy surveillance photos. But the real smoking gun?" He tapped the folder. "Address of his main distribution center. That's where you'll find all the evidence you need." I felt a surge of anticipation. "So what's our next move?" Robert and Elliot exchanged glances. "That depends," Elliot said slowly. "How far are you willing to go to bring this guy down?" I met his gaze steadily. "Whatever it takes. He threatened my life, endangered my son. I want him taken down hard." A slow smile spread across Elliot's face. "Then I think it's time we plan a little field trip." As we hashed out the details of our next move, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was it, the chance to finally put an end to the nightmare that had consumed my life. Whatever came next, I was ready. The game was entering its final phase, and I intended to emerge victorious. The warehouse loomed before us, a hulking shadow against the night sky. My heart pounded in my chest as Robert and I crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, surveying the area. "You sure about this?" Robert whispered, his face pale in the dim light. I nodded, gripping the small camera in my hand. "We need solid evidence. This is our best shot." Robert sighed, checking his watch. "All right." According to Elliot's intel, the guard should be making his rounds on the other side of the building right about now. As if on cue, a beam of light swept across the far end of the lot. We waited, breath held, until it disappeared around the corner. "Let's move," I hissed. We darted across the open space, our footsteps eerily loud in the stillness. The side door loomed before us, its keypad glowing faintly. Robert pulled out a small device, attaching it to the keypad. After a tense moment, there was a soft beep, and the door clicked open. "Remind me to thank Elliot for this little gadget," Robert muttered as we slipped inside. The interior of the warehouse was a maze of crates and machinery. We moved cautiously, guided by the blueprints Elliot had provided. "There," I pointed to a door marked Office. "That's where the records should be." As Robert worked on the lock, I kept watch, every shadow seeming to hold a potential threat. Finally, the door swung open with a soft creak. Inside, file cabinets lined the walls. We split up, rifling through documents as quickly and quietly as possible. "Michael," Robert's urgent whisper cut through the silence. "Look at this." He held up a ledger, its pages filled with columns of numbers and code names. Even at a glance, it was clear this was no legitimate business record. I snapped photo after photo, my hands shaking with adrenaline. "This is it. This is what we need." A noise from outside the office froze us in place. Footsteps, growing closer. "Hide," Robert hissed, shoving the ledger back in place. We ducked behind a large filing cabinet just as the door opened. A beam of light swept across the room, accompanied by the sound of heavy breathing. My heart hammered so loud I was sure it would give us away. Seconds stretched into an eternity as the guard moved about the office. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the footsteps receded. The door closed with a soft click. We waited another agonizing minute before daring to move. "That was too close," Robert breathed, his face ashen. I nodded, my mouth dry. "Let's get what we came for and get out of here." We worked quickly, documenting everything we could. As we prepared to leave, a flicker of movement on one of the security monitors caught my eye. "Wait," I grabbed Robert's arm. "Look." The grainy image showed a group of men unloading crates from a truck. Even through the poor quality, I recognized one of them immediately. "That's Mark," I growled. Robert's eyes widened. "We need to get closer, get clear footage of him involved in this." It was risky, but I knew he was right. This was our chance to nail Mark once and for all. We crept out of the office, making our way towards the loading dock. The sounds of voices and machinery grew louder as we approached. Finding a vantage point behind some crates, I raised the camera, zooming in on Mark's face. He was gesturing angrily at one of the workers, his features twisted with rage. "I want this shipment out by dawn," Mark's voice carried clearly. "The cops have been sniffing around, and I don't want any loose ends." I felt a satisfaction as I captured it all on video. This was the smoking gun we needed. Suddenly, a shout rang out. "Hey, who's there?" "Run!" Robert yelled, shoving me towards the exit. We sprinted through the warehouse, alarms blaring around us. Behind us, I could hear the pounding of feet and angry shouts. We burst out into the night air, not daring to look back. My lungs burned as we ran, finally reaching the car we'd stashed a few blocks away. As we peeled away from the curb, I finally allowed myself to breathe. "We did it," I gasped, clutching the camera. "We actually did it." Robert nodded, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Now comes the hard part. We need to get this to the police before Mark can cover his tracks." As we sped through the night, I felt a mixture of triumph and fear. We had the evidence we needed, but I knew Mark wouldn't go down without a fight. The final confrontation was coming, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The police station buzzed with activity as Robert and I sat in a small interview room, surrounded by stern-faced detectives. We just finished presenting our evidence, the fruits of our dangerous infiltration. Detective Sarah Reeves, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Mr. Blake, while this evidence is compelling, I have to ask, what possessed you to undertake such a risky operation on your own?" I met her gaze steadily. "Detective, I've been wrongfully imprisoned, nearly killed, and separated from my son. The system failed me once. I couldn't take that chance again." She nodded slowly. "I understand your frustration, but vigilante actions." A commotion outside the room cut her off. Shouting voices and the sound of running feet filled the air. Reeves was on her feet in an instant, hand on her weapon. "Stay here," she ordered, moving to the door. But before she could open it, the sound of gunshots rang out. My blood ran cold. "Get down," Reeves yelled, pushing Robert and me to the floor. The door burst open, and there stood Mark, wild-eyed and wielding a gun. Behind him, I could see officers scrambling for cover. "You," Mark snarled, his gaze locking onto me. "You ruined everything." Time seemed to slow. I saw Reeves reaching for her weapon, saw Mark's finger tightening on the trigger. Without thinking, I launched myself forward, tackling Mark around the waist. We crashed to the ground, the gun skittering across the floor. Mark's fist connected with my jaw, stars exploding in my vision. But I held on, grappling with him as chaos erupted around us. "Michael," Robert's voice cut through the mayhem. "Watch out." I rolled, narrowly avoiding Mark's attempt to gouge my eyes. In the struggle, I saw an opening and took it, driving my elbow into his solar plexus. Mark wheezed, momentarily stunned. It was all the time Reeves needed. She was on him in an instant, cuffs snapping around his wrists. "Mark Davidson, you're under arrest," she growled, hauling him to his feet. As other officers swarmed in, securing the area, I sagged against the wall, my heart racing. Robert was at my side in an instant. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I nodded, wincing at the pain in my jaw. Yeah, I think so." Reeves approached us, her expression a mix of admiration and exasperation. "That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, Mr. Blake. Possibly both." I managed a weak smile. "Just doing my civic duty, detective." She shook her head, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Well, your civic duty just helped us bring down a major drug operation, not to mention saving my life." "Thank you." The next few hours passed in a blur of statements and medical checks. By the time we were allowed to leave, the sun was peeking over the horizon. As we stepped out of the station, Robert turned to me. "You know, this isn't over. There's still the legal battle ahead." I nodded, feeling a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "I know, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like we've got a real shot at justice." Robert clapped me on the shoulder. "We do, and I'll be with you every step of the way." The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media frenzy. Our evidence, combined with Mark's attempted assault at the police station, blew the case wide open. As I sat in the courtroom, Watching Mark and his associates face a litany of charges, I felt a sense of vindication, but it was tempered by a new revelation that shook me to my core. The investigation has uncovered evidence of Ms. Lydia Blake's involvement in Mr. Davidson's criminal enterprises, the prosecutor announced. We will be pursuing additional charges against her. I sat there, stunned. Lydia, involved in drug trafficking? The woman I had once loved, the mother of the child I still considered my son, was deeper in this mess than I ever imagined. As the gavel fell, signaling the end of another long day in court, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. Justice was being served, but at what cost? Walking out of the courthouse, I was immediately swarmed by reporters. Mr. Blake, how do you feel about the revelations regarding your ex-wife's involvement? Are you concerned about the impact this will have on your son? Do you regret your actions in gathering evidence against Mr. Davidson? I held up a hand, silencing the barrage of questions. Taking a deep breath, I spoke clearly into the sea of microphones. What's happened here is a tragedy on many levels. Lives have been ruined, families torn apart. But the truth had to come out. As for my son, I paused, thinking of Jason's innocent face. He remains my primary concern. I will do everything in my power to protect him and give him the stable, loving home he deserves. As Robert ushered me through the crowd towards our waiting car, I caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Lydia, being led away in handcuffs, her eyes meeting mine for a brief moment. In that look, I saw a flicker of the woman I once knew, buried beneath layers of deceit and poor choices. But any sympathy I might have felt was overshadowed by the memory of her betrayal. As we drove away, Robert turned to me. You did good in there, Michael. The public's on your side now. I nodded, looking out at the city streets passing by. Maybe, but this isn't about public opinion. It's about setting things right. Robert was quiet for a moment. And Lydia? What about her? I felt a hardness settle in my chest. Lydia made her choices. Now she has to live with them. My focus is on Jason and our future. As we pulled up to my new apartment, where Jason was waiting with his nanny, I felt a sense of resolution. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly free. The final chapter of this saga was yet to be written, but I was ready to face whatever came next. For myself and for Jason. The prison visiting room was cold and sterile, a fitting backdrop for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. I sat at the small metal table, my hands clasped tightly in front of me, waiting. The door buzzed, and there she was. Lydia, a shadow of her former self, shuffled in, her prison uniform hanging loosely on her frame. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, now looked dull and haunted. "Michael," she said softly, taking the seat across from me. I didn't think you'd come." I met her gaze steadily. I almost didn't. A heavy silence fell between us, years of hurt and betrayal hanging in the air. Lydia was the first to break it, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, Michael, for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that." I felt a twinge in my chest, an echo of the love I once felt for her. But it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of her betrayal. "Why, Lydia?" I asked, my voice low. "Why did you do it? Was our life together so terrible?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. No, it wasn't. I was selfish, stupid. Mark, he made me feel alive. I got caught up in the excitement, the danger. Before I knew it, I was in too deep. I leaned back, processing her words. "And Jason? Did you ever think about him in all this?" A sob escaped her. "Every day. God, Michael, I've ruined everything. Our family, Jason's future." "No," I cut her off sharply. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to wallow in self-pity. Jason will be fine. I'll make sure of it." Lydia looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "You'll take care of him?" I nodded. "He's my son, Lydia. Biology doesn't change that." "Thank you," she whispered. "Michael, I know I have no right to ask, but can you ever forgive me?" I stood up, my decision made long before I stepped into this room. "No, Lydia, I can't. What you did, it's not just about me. You put our child in danger. You were willing to let me rot in prison. Some things can't be forgiven. Her face crumpled, but I steeled myself against the urge to comfort her. That wasn't my role anymore. I hope you find peace, Lydia. For Jason's sake, I hope you use this time to become a better person. But my life, our life together, that's over. As I turned to leave, Lydia called out one last time. Michael, I did love you. I still do. I paused at the door, not turning back. Goodbye, Lydia. Walking out of the prison, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not really, but it was closure. The final tie to my old life, severed. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change. With Lydia's conviction and my exoneration splashed across every newspaper, I found myself thrust into an unexpected spotlight. But my focus remained singular, Jason. Setting up our new home, I was determined to create a stable, loving environment for him. It wasn't easy, balancing single parenthood with rebuilding my life, but I was committed to making it work. One sunny afternoon, as I was struggling to assemble a bookshelf in Jason's room, a knock at the door startled me. Coming, I called out, navigating through the maze of moving boxes. I opened the door to find a woman standing there, a young girl hiding shyly behind her legs. Hi, she said, offering a warm smile. I'm Samantha, your new neighbor. We just wanted to welcome you to the building. Oh, thanks, I replied, caught off guard by the kind gesture. I'm Michael. And this little guy, I added, as Jason toddled up behind me, is Jason. Samantha's eyes lit up. Well, hello there, Jason. This is my daughter, Lily. She's about your age. As the kids eyed each other curiously, Samantha held up a covered dish. I hope you like lasagna. Moving is hungry work. I felt a genuine smile spread across my face for the first time in what felt like forever. That's incredibly kind of you. Would you like to come in? Fair warning, it's a bit chaotic in here. Samantha laughed, a warm, infectious sound. Trust me, I remember those days. We'd be happy to help if you need an extra pair of hands. And just like that, my quiet afternoon of unpacking turned into something unexpectedly wonderful. Samantha proved to be not just a kind neighbor, but a godsend. She expertly wrangled the kids while helping me make sense of the assembly instructions I'd been struggling with. As we worked and chatted, I found myself opening up about my story. To my surprise, Samantha listened without judgment, offering understanding and support. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, she said softly, as we watched Jason and Lily play with building blocks. What matters is how we handle them. I nodded, feeling a warmth in my chest I hadn't experienced in a long time. You're right. And sometimes, those curveballs lead us exactly where we need to be. Over the next few months, Samantha and Lily became fixtures in our lives. Playdates turned into shared dinners, which evolved into movie nights and weekend outings. Slowly but surely, I felt myself healing, learning to trust and open up again. One evening, as we sat on my balcony after putting the kids to bed, Samantha turned to me with a serious expression. Michael, she began, her voice soft, I need to tell you something. My heart raced, fear of another betrayal flashing through my mind. What is it? She took a deep breath. I think I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, I was paralyzed, memories of Lydia's betrayal warring with the genuine affection I felt for Samantha. But as I looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity and vulnerability there, I made a decision. I was done letting the past dictate my future. Samantha, I said, taking her hand in mine, I think I'm falling in love with you too. The kiss we shared was sweet and full of promise. As we pulled apart, both of us a little breathless, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. The next year was a whirlwind of joy and challenges. Blending our families had its ups and downs, but watching Jason and Lily grow close, seeing them support and love each other, made every difficult moment worth it. On a crisp autumn day, surrounded by our closest friends and family, Samantha and I exchanged vows. As I looked out at the gathering, I saw Travis and Robert beaming proudly and felt a surge of gratitude for the unwavering support they'd shown me through everything. Later, as Samantha and I swayed gently to our first dance as husband and wife, I caught sight of Jason and Lily giggling as they attempted to mimic our steps. "Look at them," Samantha whispered, following my gaze. "We did good, didn't we?" I pulled her closer, feeling a contentment I never thought I'd experience again. "We did. We really did." As the party wound down and we prepared to leave for our honeymoon, I found a quiet moment alone with Jason. Kneeling down to his level, I looked into his eyes, so trusting and full of love. "You know I love you, right, buddy? More than anything in this world." Jason nodded solemnly. "I love you too, Daddy." Pulling him into a tight hug, I made a silent vow. The past might have been full of pain and betrayal, but Jason's future, our future as a family, would be filled with love, trust, and happiness. As we drove away, Samantha's hand in mine, the kids waving excitedly from the back seat, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road had been long and difficult, but it had led me here, to this moment, to this family. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we'd face them together. The nightmare was over. This, right here, was my happily ever after. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.